This is the How to Write Funny podcast. I'm Scott Dikkers, your host. Alex Stevenson is a cartoonist and writer, that's a pseudonym, who's carving out a place in a new comedy sphere by leveraging the popularity of memes to create a new kind of comic strip called Cartoons Hate Her. She calls it quasi-feminine Gen Y and Z stuff, and it's building a big fan base on social media, which has led to a best-selling book, Dear God, Am I Hot?, and a follow-up, The Troll Handbook. Alex, why did you decide not to go a more traditional route of publishing comics in a newspaper or in a comic book or something like that to start with?
Oh, wow. This is actually the first time that idea even occurred to me.
This very question.
Yes. I never even considered it, honestly, until now. Probably because I have no connections to that world, really. I wouldn't even know where to start. I wouldn't know the right people. But what I am good at is the internet and memes and just being funny on the internet. I mean, I've been an avid Redditor for years. I'm part of a lot of meme groups on Facebook, and I just love to post funny memes. So when I started Cartoons Hate Her, it wasn't meant to be monetized or even like a big thing. It was really just, I had funny drawings that I did over Christmas break. I wanted to show them to my friends, and they were like, oh, create a Facebook page. I was like, yeah, okay. And then that got kind of big. And that was never really the end game. But, my brother told me when I started it, like, don't put something out there hoping to monetize it. Just do what people want to see. So I started doing what people wanted to see, and it certainly at the time was not something that I anticipated to be a big deal. And who knows if it's a big deal, but I would like it to be.
No, that's good advice. How did you get good at memes and the internet? Just growing up on it? Or?
Yeah, just growing up on it.
And when you say you're good at memes, do you mean you're good at making them or just seeing them and posting ones that people tend to like?
I would say both. My brother and I are in a group chat with a friend of ours. They would say I produce terrible content. I'm always posting memes that they think are lame. But I'm 6 years older than them, so I'm chalking it up to a generational difference. But I'm trying to think of like where I got started. I love trolling. I love making up fake identities online and messing with people, and not in a way that's like threatening or offensive or racist or anything, but just creating funny characters that people want to see. And I started doing this when I was 13 on the Noggin message board. I would go on there and I would just create this character and annoy people, and it was just fun. Like a lot of people don't get why I enjoy it. They're like, why would you spend your time doing this? No one even knows it's you. You don't get any credit for it. And I was just like, well, it makes me laugh. And like, I sent it to my friends and family. So I was doing that since I was 13, and I've been, just posting goofy characters on Reddit for a while. I had this neckbeard character called Your Local Neckbeard, and he is constantly talking about how no women are hot enough for him and posting his ridiculous requirements for women. And it's, very clearly a joke because he's calling himself a neckbeard. So there's no debate over whether or not this is a real person. And so I've just always been good at creating these goofy accounts and goofy characters. And I had never actually made any comics, though I'm not a good artist. You've probably noticed from my comics, I'm not like a trained artiste. But eventually I realized you don't always need to be if you have something funny to say. I think that my comics, the main aspect of them is that they're funny. And then secondarily, like maybe occasionally I draw a hand with the correct amount of fingers, but that's a lucky day.
Great drawing is not really funny, but crappy or mediocre drawing can be really funny.
Yeah, exactly.
And it doesn't really matter what the drawing is as long as the style matches the text, which yours does. It's all about the writing.
Yeah,
it's little poems or little haikus or little sayings, or in your case, little memes.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
When you made these characters, did you find that you were getting some traction on some of them? Like people would respond in character and play along? Or were they taking them seriously? Or how was that going? The troll.
Oh, yeah. All of the above. I would say a lot of people will sort of play along. They see Your Local Neckbeard. They're like, okay, that's a joke, clearly. And then they'll start sort of pretending to be a neckbeard in turn. They'll be like, oh, tips fedora, milady. Although that trope has become a bit antiquated. I mean, it was super saturated, but I still enjoy it. And then, I had this is another one that people took really seriously. I created this troll. I was a mom of four who sells a product that she calls Coochie Dust, and she never really elaborates on what it is, but it's clearly some like hokey feminine product. And she posted on the Ask Women Advice subreddit saying that she was banned from her high school reunion because they're afraid she's going to sell her coochie dust. And everyone is sort of advising her, like, they don't realize it's a joke. They're like, well, could you just not bring it? Or could you just like promise not to sell it? And then she starts fighting back, basically saying, well, that was the whole reason I wanted to go, is I have all this inventory. What am I going to do with it? And then she tries to start recruiting people in the comment section to sell for coochie dust. And they get so mad, they got really, really pissed off at her. And then eventually someone, told her to get lost. And she was like, I say she, but it was me. She was like,
oh, it's the character. I understand.
I separate so much from my characters, but she was like, I'm sensing a lot of negativity in your voice right now. And I think that you would really benefit from coochie dust. And also I sell some essential oils. And that was just hilarious. And at that point, I think people were like, okay, this isn't real.
That's great. That's great. Being able to ride that line between people not knowing if it's real or not is an avenue for comedy online that a lot of people don't take advantage of. Just coming up with funny characters and posting.
Oh yeah, I love it.
And getting traction. You did that. You had the memes. Tell me more about the memes. So you said you mostly were creating memes, not necessarily just reposting memes that you saw.
Yeah, although I'm using the word meme really broadly. Like, I think when people think of memes, they think of like the socially awkward duck and then like the impact. It's always like white impact font above and below. I never really created those, or if I did, I was never really very good at it. My trolls sort of were my memes. And I have this like code of honor. I have a very specific code of honor with my trolls. Like, if I'm going to be offensive, it has to be so ridiculous that no one would ever actually take offense. It has to be like owning that it's a joke. Mm-hmm. No harassment. I don't like to private message with people. If someone private messages me, I'll sort of joke around, but I don't create relationships. I don't catfish people. But with that code of honor, I've just sort of been creating these characters, and then I'll take like a screenshot of what I put out there. And that's sort of the meme in and of itself. So when I say meme, I more mean like internet joke, because the traditional meme that you would have seen around 2009, 2010 that has the impact letters, a memorable character like the duck or that socially awkward pigeon. I keep forgetting, a penguin. That's it. I sound like...
Yeah. So in order to know all these things, like I don't know a lot of these things because I don't spend any time really on Facebook, a little bit on Twitter, but not much. There's a certain meme culture and like internet culture where certain things get passed around. Things are in fashion for a while, then they're not. Everybody knows, oh yeah, like you were saying, the duck thing or whatever. Like how much time do you have to spend on Facebook in order to be aware of those trends? Like generally, how much time traditionally have you spent there to get good at this and understand this culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably more Reddit is where I hang out. A little bit Twitter I'm almost new to, actually. I would say constantly. Like if someone had no exposure to social media and was like, I want to get good at internet memes, they would have to be like locked in a room with just nothing but screens for probably days. Like,
and you'd have to learn the history too.
Yeah, you'd have to learn the history. And to me, it's really innate because I grew up right when all this stuff started. And so I didn't like start my first Reddit account being like, I'm going to learn about Reddit culture. But I did. And so a lot of things about Reddit culture actually have become more mainstream now. And I get to feel really superior and be like, oh, I knew about it way back when. But there's so many different subcultures within the internet. And I think like girl internet culture has changed a lot since I was growing up. It started a little more, to use a word that's very anti our current girl culture, but a little cattier. And now girls criticizing other girls online is almost a taboo. It's all about building each other up. Sometimes to the point that I think it's like, okay, you're allowed to criticize a woman who does something that's bad. Not everyone is perfect. But making fun of a woman for her clothing or her weight, that used to be, people being funny. And now that's really hurtful and people are mindful of that. So there's so many things that have changed. And then I think there are other areas on the internet where making fun of a woman or a man, for that matter, for their clothing or weight are still very much acceptable. For the record, I don't like to do that. But I'd say there's so many little subcultures, especially on Reddit, because each Reddit has a subreddit. Like the website Reddit has a million different, and each of those is like they're echo chambers really, and you go in there and it's a completely different culture from a different one. Occasionally I'll forget which sub I'm on, and I'll see someone say something, I'm like, they should be getting like roasted for that, and then I'm like, oh, I'm on a different sub. It's the cool thing to say on that sub.
Wow, yeah. So I keep thinking of the original meaning of the word meme because it kind of has different meanings now. Like you said, it's that impact font with the above and below on a picture was what it was traditionally for a long time. Now it's sort of like any character. Sometimes it's like a Twitter response that someone will just screen capture and send.
Like a Twitter Yeah,
But
anything.
originally it was just a variation on the word gene, because the idea was genes are things that lower animals use to impact the world after they die. They leave their genes behind. They leave their offspring.
Okay.
But in an intellectual culture, in an advanced culture like ours, you can leave more than just your genes behind. You can leave memes, which are cultural memories that survive and impact other people.
It makes what I do sound a lot more noble. So I'm going to go with it.
Take it. Take it. Tell me how the move went then from being an expert at memes and kind of understanding that whole meme culture to, okay, I'm going to start this Facebook page where I do drawings with little
Right.
writing.
Yeah, so I should clarify that like I've always done drawings at home. It's something that I never thought I was good because I'm not. So I would always do it just like with my mom and brother and my dad and just sort of joking around. And so one of the things that I did a lot when I was in high school was I would draw caricatures of my ex-boyfriends, which in my book I've been able to put them into actual drawings for that. But
Great.
I would do it on tablecloths at dinner at like restaurants. They give you like the crayons for a child, and I'm like, can I have crayons? And then my mom is a really good artist. She actually is a great cartoon artist, but it was never really her career. It's just something she does sort of for fun. So we would sort of do that together. And then that sort of, it was just sort of a funny, goofy thing I did, and I never thought much of it, but I developed, any drawing skills I have, I developed through that, which I admittedly is not much. But then, like I said, in December 2018, I don't know, I was bored. I don't know what I was doing. And I was kind of running out of ideas for memes. Like that's the thing is I'm very prolific. I do a lot, but that means occasionally I just run out of ideas. So my brother came up with the idea of like, why don't you draw something? Like you've drawn really funny things in the past, just making fun of people that we know. And so I was like, yeah, okay. So what I did was I drew what became known as like the Thought Collection. That hoe over there. I didn't realize the word was misogynistic. I think a lot of people use it in that way. I was using it in almost like an owning it kind of way, just sort of being funny. I don't know. So I drew like what your average thought looked like every year from 2003 onward.
Okay.
So my comics and my book are really nostalgia oriented. So it was kind of just that. And I would I send them to my friends, like, and that was it. I wasn't putting them out there. And then I posted them just on my personal account. I posted them to a meme group like, haha, look what I did. And it sparked like a ton of discussion. First of all, because a lot of people had not satirized clothing from those time periods before, because they're relatively recent. And then also because the use of the word thought made people think I was a misogynist, which actually worked in my favor because it created a lot of engagement. People were complaining and arguing, and then some people were defending me, and I defended myself. And that actually probably rose my post in the ranks because so many people were commenting. And that's kind of my mantra going forward. If people are arguing, hey, it's good for my exposure. And so they were, going nuts about the memes or the drawings in this case. And so someone said something, do you have a page I could follow? People kept asking me like, can I follow you? And I was like, follow me? Like, I'm so private. Like I have this private page with so few friends. And I was like, yeah, no. And then I was like, wait, I could create a public page. So I did, but instead of using my real name, I used Cartoons Hate Her. And the reason for that was I just wanted something that sounded gimmicky and internet-y, and cartoons are what I do. And I stole the Hate Her from those spammy ads you might see. This is dermatologist hate her, local mom looks 25. Right. Yeah, so I did that. And it just sort of blew up. And then I was like, oh, I kind of enjoy this. I'll keep doing this. It's cheap to do. I just have pen and paper, and then I take phone pictures and color them in. And I still do my characters on Reddit, though. I've started to expand where I'm not just doing my cartoons, because honestly, it'll be hard for me. I try to put out content every other day, and it's really hard to put out something every other day. So sometimes I'll take old posts from some of my troll accounts and just post it there, because no one's ever seen those before. I've got all this content kind of hiding because I never wanted to associate with it, because it was like, who does that? Everyone says, oh, you're probably a 40-year-old virgin in your mom's basement. Like, no, but...
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. There obviously are a lot of incels and right-wing trolls online who are posting about thoughts or, misogynistic stuff. And it's kind of a thing in comedy where comedy writers realize that they're in a bit of a tinderbox if they try to do anything edgy or that's perceived as anti-woman if they're a woman, because the reader doesn't know they're a woman, and it might be like you're a black person and you're making some sort of thing that people are going to perceive as racist against black people.
Yeah.
And your stuff is kind, it's not offensive, it's not punching down. When you look at it, do you think, if this came from the 40-year-old virgin living in his mother's basement, would this be offensive? Or do you think, no, it's good? I wouldn't be offended if a 40-year-old virgin in his mother's basement made this.
Well, I also don't want to come off as playing it too safe to the point where it's like, oh, she's more concerned with offending people
then it's just
being
paddling.
funny. There are things I would do if I wasn't worried about offending people on both male and female. They're totally comics I would do if I wasn't worried about that. But at the end of the day, I'd rather people think, oh, she's too safe than get canceled. That's
Sure.
like my fear. Like someone on Twitter is like, cartoons hate her as an internalized misogynist and she's terrible or she hates men. And next thing I know, I've lost all my followers. And then I have to publicly apologize, which publicly apologizing is one of the most cringe things. And
Yes.
I hate the concept, but I would have to do it if I genuinely felt I hurt people.
That's quite a worst case scenario, though. Do you really see that happening ever?
I'm not
Like,
really
how bad would a
famous enough,
cartoon
I don't
have to
know.
be?
Probably pretty bad, but also you'd be shocked at what people find offensive. Like, have you ever seen those memes? It's like, a lot of teenage girls do them. It's like me versus other girls. And it's always like other girls, like blonde, slutty,
Sure.
like makeup, me, like reads books, likes Harry Potter. And they're cringe and they're lame. But a lot of teenage girls had a phase where they thought they were special because they weren't, a whore. I don't know what they think about other girls. But anyway, those are made fun of a lot now because we all did them when we were 15 and now we laugh about them. And so I've done some parodies of them. So I did one that for the first two panels looked like exactly what those look like. It was like other girls, like hot, feminine, wears heels, blonde, desperate for male attention, whatever. You, and then it's this like mousy brown-haired girl reading a book, and it's like likes books, introvert, like doesn't need a lot of friends, doesn't care what boys think. But then what makes it a satire is there's a third panel that says this other girl who thinks that you're a basic bitch. And it's this girl covered in garbage who her best friend is a Sprite Zero bottle, like just the weirdest freaking crazy person you can imagine. And the joke there is no matter how unique and different you are, there's probably someone weirder than you that thinks you're one of the basic bitches. So it's a joke on that meme.
Right.
But I posted it and people were like, aren't we past this? Aren't we past tearing other women down? Why do you think any girl prettier than you is a hoe? And I'm like, oh my God, no, like, and at that point, I'm like, I'm not even going to respond. Like, I'm like, if you can't understand the most basic satire.
But surely there's a small percentage of people who are that dumb who just aren't getting the joke.
Yeah,
who
they exist.
aren't getting the meta humor, but I'm hoping that the vast majority get it and appreciate it.
Oh, most people get it. Most people
Great.
they have a good sense of humor, and I think most of my followers are genuinely great people. There are things I've apologized a couple times if something was like taken out of context, but typically I don't have to because most people will defend me before I have to say anything. Usually someone will be like, are you kidding me? It's cartoons hate her. She does the satire. And then I don't even have to say anything. And thank you to those people for doing that for me. It makes my life easier. But in terms of like putting out comedy that I would be afraid could be seen as misogynistic if it was done by a man, I do always ask myself that. Like if this was a man, would it be okay? Typically the answer is yes. I've posted a couple comics where I had to rethink it. And I was like, you know what? If I was a man, I'd probably be offended by this, and I maybe. But also, I'm not easily offended by that stuff, so it's hard to say.
Right.
My barometer is a little different. I've always been a Redditor, and so to me, what's offensive is incredibly offensive stuff, whereas a joke about women taking too long in the bathroom, like I find kind of funny, actually. So I try to, and now as I'm saying that, I'm like, oh my God, people are going to be like, oh, she's a cool girl. She's trying too hard. She's trying too hard to be like one of the guys. I'm like, no, not at all. But I don't know. I just think like if the intention is to be goofy and funny and done with love, I don't have the energy to be upset about it.
Yeah, no, it's good attitude because, you want to ruffle some feathers. If you're not offending anyone, you're probably not doing satire right.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
You get a little bit of ruffled feathers in there, you're doing good. It spurs comment. Like you said, your stuff gets a lot of comments. Are you more focused on Reddit
Well, my page is everywhere. I have a Facebook
see.
page, I have a Reddit account, I have an Instagram page, and I have a Twitter
And a
page.
Reddit, so I don't really use Reddit. I mean, I've been there and I've seen it, but I'm totally not into it. I'm too old, I think. But Reddit, you
I
don't
feel
have
too
like
old, and I'm 30.
you have an account, but you don't have like a page or a source where people go, here's all her stuff on Reddit. Is that how it works?
Well,
or
you
not?
could go to my profile. It's just user cartoons hate her. That of course is not my personal Reddit account where I post embarrassing personal things. This is just my professional account. If you could call it professional.
Right, your cartoon account.
Yeah, my cartoon account. But you would go there and you could see my post history, and so you could
I
see
see.
everything I've posted that I haven't deleted. I've had to delete a few things because the comments got out of hand. I don't usually do it, but I occasionally do. And then Instagram, Facebook is just a page.
So when you post a new cartoon, you're posting to all the major social media networks.
Not always. I post to Facebook and Instagram usually around the same time, usually the same thing. But for example, Instagram, I'll post pictures of myself as an individual. I don't post that on Facebook. They get a totally different, because I like to do some fashion stuff, and that does a lot better on Instagram, where people are there to discover outfits and clothes and stuff
Right.
like that. And on Facebook, I'm not sure that they do as well. And then Twitter, sometimes with Twitter, I'll just like post random tweets. I'll just post like comments,
Yeah,
but I
comments.
won't always post comics because they don't always show up very well on Twitter. You have to like enlarge them.
Right, you have to
Like,
click
so
on them.
yeah. So what I post on different networks has to do with what does well there. And then on Reddit, it's like, what sub am I going to post on? I don't
I
just
see.
post to my profile. I post on a sub. And so like, I love the Troll X chromosome sub. It's just like feminist humor, but I don't post my satire stuff there because every time I do, they don't get that it's satire. And they say, well, you're tearing women down. So I don't even I'm exhausted. I don't want to do this. So there I'll post my like blatantly feminist stuff there. That's just like, feminism is good. It's like the joke is like
Right.
feminism. And I'll post that there. But every time I post one of my jokes about not like other girls, they always take it seriously. And I'm like, I just don't feel like defending myself. And then I also just post on the comic subreddit, but they tend to like more professional, like comics.
Right.
And sometimes they'll be confused. They're like, this is just a picture of someone saying yeet. How is that a comic? I'm like, use your imagination.
Do you have a separate Instagram account for like your personal pictures of you in fashion and your cartoons, or do you mix them?
Oh, I mix them.
Okay.
I mix them because, first of all, my comics, the main character is me. So initially I wanted to keep my real face out of it entirely, but then I was just feeling, dangerous one day, and I posted my real face, just hoping I wouldn't get an onslaught of rude comments. But my followers are cool, and they generally don't do that, with a couple of exceptions. But yeah, I posted like, I think an outfit. Yeah, I posted this outfit that I was really proud of, and I was like, I want to post this because I'm not too active on social networks on my personal life. So I posted it, and it actually did better than all of my comics. And I was like, I worked so much harder on the comics. But then I realized like, oh, it actually does increase engagement. People enjoy it, and people enjoy getting to know me as a person. Obviously I don't share very much about my personal life, but they know I'm married. They know I'm 30. They know what I enjoy. And I think it adds another cool layer, but I try to keep a good balance of like selfies and comics so it doesn't become like, hey, I followed for the comics and all I'm getting is attention whoring. Although it's all attention whoring. I'm just trying to get attention here.
Right. And you're anonymous on social media, right? Like you don't use your real name.
No, I don't. I am not like if some of my followers I actually became friends with in real life. So they know who I am and they've been to my house and stuff. But in general, I do try to keep I keep a low profile just because, I don't know, I kind of play a character, and that character is similar to who I am in real life, but not identical. And I think saying too much about who I am in real life and my personal problems and my personal things makes it a little less funny because then I'm not the character I'm playing anymore.
Right.
So the character I'm playing is, and this is somewhat accurate of me, is like a 30-year-old woman desperate to appeal to Generation Z. So I'm constantly using ridiculous slang and like calling things on fleek. And obviously I don't talk that way in real life. So that's why I want to keep playing that character.
Right.
It's an exaggeration of who I am in real life. But the minute I bring in who I really am, then it's not funny anymore because it's like, oh, you're not really that ridiculous.
Right. No, it's like a stand-up comic would have a comedic persona, like
Exactly.
a slight exaggeration of who they
Yeah.
really are. But haven't you had some problems with like creepos and like weird people?
Yeah, nothing too bad. But what happens is like I'm super friendly. So if I get a private message, I respond to it, and I always do. And I've had to learn over time that not all private messages should be responded to. because I don't assume if a man is contacting me that it's sexual. I assume that he likes my comics and he's a nice guy, and 90% of the time that is true. Like, I actually have amazing male followers, and I think most men are good people. But then occasionally I'll get someone who just says like, "Hey, what's up?" And I'm like, "Oh, hi, so glad you like the comics." And then suddenly I think it was like a teenage boy sent me a message that was like, "I'd hit that," and I was like, "Thank you, but." No, I don't know like what to even say, but it's usually not that bad. I think the worst of the people who look at my comics are people who like will create an alternate account just to slam them. But I find that funny because imagine hating content so much and finding content so unfunny that you go to the effort to create a new account, a new email address, a new
baffling.
verification.
Absolutely
probably
baffling.
Freaking 2-step verification, maybe a new cell phone even.
Yeah. No, the links people will
and then
go
just to be like, you're
be
not
petty.
funny. I'm like,
Yeah.
I see things I don't find funny. I don't go to that much trouble to
Right.
tell them.
You just move on.
Yeah,
to the
right.
next
It's like
thing.
I just move on. And someone recently commented like, "You're old." I'm like, okay. Like, I've said how old I am, so I don't know what you want me to say to that.
That's crazy. So did you do anything to promote your work early on, or was it really just organic growth through getting a lot of comments and people responding to the stuff?
Mostly organic growth. I do a lot of like, I personally am a member of a lot of meme communities. Like, I don't like to just like be self-promotional and then be like, "Bye everyone." Like, usually when I post something I've done, I'm posting it in a community that I've already been part of. So it doesn't look self-promotional. Although I have been accused of being self-promotional, which, hey, what are you going to do? I kind of have to be. So that's why I know the right communities to post in. So I'll post in these communities organically. It doesn't cost me anything to post. And usually that'll raise my follower count. And yeah, I mean, that's really what it is. And I think meme groups are huge because there's tons of people there. They're specifically there to find stuff they find funny. But meme groups, I think, only exist on Facebook. There aren't any like groups on Twitter, for example. Twitter, it's been harder, but I also don't post to it very often. So it's kind of a trade-off. Like, where do you put
Right.
most of your energy? But then I think what's tricky is promoting my book because, I mean, it costs $3. That's really not very much. But I think a lot of people, they don't want the commitment of like reading an entire book. So I think short form content is so much better. They like it, they comment on it, they maybe subscribe. But to say, and people who like my book, it has 5 stars. It was a #1 bestseller in its category. But
Great.
yeah, which I'm very proud of. But a lot of people, I mean, most of my followers have obviously not bought it. I think it's a bigger ask. And I think that's where comedy's going, is that the easier to digest and like the quicker you can get something, the better. And there's still such a place for books, but they're obviously going to be a lot less palatable than like, check out this meme I made about butts. Like, that's obviously going to be, more people are going to want to look at that because it takes them 5 seconds. They get the
Yep.
joke. It's like, okay,
Super
we're good.
low
and then
barrier
they can,
to entry.
right. And then they can go about their day. I'm not
Right.
asking them to like
Yep.
open their Kindle, like read something. Although
Yeah.
to anyone listening, please open your Kindle and read my book.
Yeah, but even like, and it's one of the reasons I want to talk to you is because the comics industry, the traditional comics industry, which I started out in, is struggling to figure out how to survive in the internet age. And they really haven't. The closest thing is Go Comics, which has all the traditional comics, and you can sign up and you'll get like an email every day that tells you what, it's like your comics page, and you get to select what comics are on your comics page. So that's like an updated internet Sunday comics section or daily comics page or whatever. But even that feels really antiquated compared to how you're doing it, which is very stealth. It's very social media friendly.
Oh, yeah.
You just post a thing and people comment on it. They pass it around just like a meme, because memes are the new comic strip. There's no question about it.
Yeah, it's true.
And people are trying to figure out, well, how do you monetize that? Because in the old days, you would sell it to a newspaper and they would pay you a few bucks a day. And then the more newspapers you were in, the more money you would make. But now they're free and people
Right.
are just going to pass them around for free.
Man, I
So-
wish people were paying me to look at my memes.
Yeah,
I'd
well,
make a lot
but
more money.
and the smart strategy that you pursued was understand that the free bar has moved. So now you have to produce free content and you have to put it out there, but you're building a following and that's an asset. And so you couldn't do that before. You
Right.
had to get paid to build the asset. So now you have this following and now you can put out your comics in a book. You can do merchandising, do whatever you want. You're just getting started doing it. But I'm really curious to know what the process was for a book. Like, when did you feel like you had enough comics or enough material? And how did you decide on the mix of what material to include in the book and so on and so forth?
That's a great question. I think I've been a writer a lot longer than I've been a cartoonist because I've been a writer longer than 6 months. I've been a writer for like 20 years, I guess, since I could learn how to write. And I always wrote these sort of long form novels, which were usually funny, but there's not always a place for that. Like people who read novels, I've learned, really want to read something heartwarming. If you're too funny, it's like none of the characters are likable. And they're always like, oh my God, I hate all these characters. I'm like, yeah, that's the point. Like they're funny characters. Like, do you really like any characters in Arrested Development? Like, no, you hate all of them, but you enjoy it. And so I had to readjust and be like, okay, maybe people need, like you said, free content, stuff on social media. And I think that is the way. And I see other cartoonists that are really successful and they have maybe 100,000 followers. I hope that I'm at that point sometime soon. And I think, I want to write 1 book a year. That's sort of the resolution I've made for myself. And I don't anticipate the first few to make that much money because that's not what it's about. It's about just like building up that reputation of like, oh, cartoons hate her. She does cringe nostalgia comedy with a girly slant, but like it's for men too. And she publishes 1 book a year. It's $3, and maybe the paperback is expensive because it's got images, but that's a holiday gift perhaps. But the Kindle is $3, and I just want that to be like my thing. So I'm currently in the mindset of like, what do I publish next year? But in terms of Dear God, Am I Hot? That actually, I wrote that. Well, technically, I wrote it when I was a child because it's my real diaries from when I was a kid. But the first time I put it in that format of like modern day annotations and like obviously trimming out a lot of fat because an 11-year-old girl's musings on the world, there's a point where you have to cut it off. Otherwise it would have been, 1,000 pages long. And I was a dutiful diary keeper as a child. Technically I wrote it, like I said, when I was a kid, but I like trimmed it and like edited it and annotated it when I was in my early 20s. And I tried to get it published actually without any comics. This was before I was doing my cartoons. And the answer I got was like, no one knows who you are. Why would anyone want to read about your childhood? Like, and I was there like, oh, it doesn't matter if no one knows who I am because it's funny and like it's relatable and who cares? But that's just, that's the market, I guess. If I, am a nobody, who cares? And so I took that mindset of like, okay, nobody cares. And later on, I didn't start my comics with the intention of like, finally an outlet to post that diary book. Like I wasn't even thinking about it, but I was posting my comics. And once I got past that 20,000 follower threshold, I was like, I could actually do something with this. And I spoke to another comic artist, and she's a much better actual artist than me, but even she considers herself not a good artist, which she said that to me, and I was like, oh man, I shouldn't even be allowed online. But anyway, she mentioned to me that like once she got past 20,000 followers, that's when people started contacting her, asking her to make things or asking her to rep something for them. And that hasn't quite happened to me yet, but whatever, I'll just go after it. So I published this book on Amazon, and it was super easy, minus the formatting queries. But other than that, it was super easy. And then I just posted it to my channel, and launch day was pretty huge, and it made #1 new release, and then also #1 bestseller in its category. Of course, I would love for more people to buy it. I don't think it's over, but it was great. And then I have 5-star reviews, not 5 reviews. I have 5-star reviews. It's on Goodreads. I thought I would have to manually upload it on Goodreads, but it's just there. I'm like, cool.
They show up.
I put it out there, although I will say there were a lot of negotiations between me and myself about what to include, just because, again, thinking about the changing political landscape, a lot of things I wrote in that book when I first drafted it as an early 20-something, today, I would not say a lot of those things. I had to go through and like really revise it. And I don't want anyone to think that they were like racial slurs. It was nothing like that, but more like internalized misogyny, or what people would call internalized misogyny. I don't think that's what it was, but I had to.
And it wasn't
change
self-aware internalized misogyny either.
Right. Now I do the self-aware thing where I'm like
right.
jokingly say these things, but it was, because I was bullied a lot, and I think it still affects me that I still see a group of 12-year-old girls at the mall, and I think they're like uploading a video of me to TikTok to make fun of me. But like I was bullied a lot as a kid. And so the things I said about the girls who bullied me, like maybe I called them sluts or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to call them, I'm not going to go after their sexual behavior, which I don't even know anything about.
Right.
So I had to readjust and maybe say like, hey, they're mean. Like I can say that they are mean, but I'm not going to say that they're slutty. That, and then also some things I put there that I was like, that's too personal. Like I think in my early 20s, I was like, I want everyone to know everything. And then, there's sexual stuff in there, but I took some of it out because I was like, you know what? This is making me cringe beyond cringe comedy. Mm-hmm. It's gone from comedic cringe into full body cringe. And I don't even remember what I took out, but there were some things where I was like, you know what? I don't want everyone knowing this.
So the book is your cartoons, but it melds the cartoons with your diaries from when you were 11 that you assembled when you were 20.
Yeah, although they're not just 11. They start at 11, but they go to 17.
Got it.
The original book was only supposed to be middle school, but then it was actually my brother's idea. He was like, put out your high school stuff. And I was like, I don't know, because high school I had really bad OCD. And I was like, a lot of my high school stuff is just like me writing the same phrase over and over again because I think something bad will happen if I don't. He was like, don't you see? That's so funny. I'm like, I guess it kind of is. So I included my high school stuff. And that I felt a little iffy about, especially because the high school stuff wasn't as... it's not as cringe. By high school, you have a little bit of self-awareness, but in a way that almost makes it more embarrassing. So it's a different thing, but I also like that you can grow with me. Like, how many people kept dutifully a diary from age 11 to 17? Not many.
No, it's pretty impressive.
So you can see my grammar getting better, my spelling getting better. One of my reviews was like, there's so many typos. I'm like, no, that's just me having bad spelling as a kid.
That's sick.
Right? It's meant to be that way.
Yeah. That's really interesting that you decided to do the first book that way. You probably didn't have enough cartoons to just do a book of cartoons, nor would you want to, because you've always done writing and you kind of want that to be a part of your personal brand.
I do want to put out a coffee table book of my cartoons. Maybe that'll be next year's. I don't know yet.
Yeah. I'm interested to know the weeds of how you figured out how to self-publish a book, because it can be difficult. But first, I want to know what happened to all those other books, like those comedy novels you wrote. Like, why aren't you just releasing those to have like a backlist? Are they gone, or do you still have them?
Some of them are gone because my computer
tragedy.
broke. But those are the ones I probably would just want to take the general idea from and not the actual book.
Okay.
Again, I feel like some of my comedy did not age very well.
Were these written when you were a teenager?
Yeah. I don't think anyone wants to put out a novel they wrote as a teenager. I wrote, this is so embarrassing, but I was this part's not embarrassing. I was a huge David Sedaris fan. And I still am. Sure. I think he's great. And I wrote, I kid you not, a 300-page autobiographical, it was almost funny, but mostly dramatic book about my time at theater camp. And that, I want to go back in time and murder myself for that. That's horrible to me. That I was like, everyone needs to hear about all the people I knew at theater camp. And actually there were some interesting stuff in there, but like it could have been a 10-page, or it could have been a comic, could have been a single comic, right. Which I covered theater camp in my book because I almost got expelled. That was the the big climax of it, is that I almost got expelled for flashing someone. Mostly because they thought that there was they really thought that there was a pedophile in charge of this, that there was some like townie, I guess, who was coming in like coercing kids to flash each other. But then in questioning us, because they interrogated us, they realized we were just doing this on our own to be funny. So they threatened to call my parents. Mm-hmm. And they never called my parents. And then they kind of just let us go. They were like, oh, we're good. But I preemptively apologized in an email, which was horrible. It was really embarrassing.
Yeah, the preemptive apology, that's a running theme, how much you hate that.
But I do it all the time. That's
apparently
why I hate it.
You do. But when you do edgy humor, you have to do that once in a while. Well, you feel like you have to because you have this fear that the whole world is going to hate you and your career is going to be ruined.
I mean, my biggest desire is to be liked by everyone. I just want everyone to love me and to give me attention and for all of it to be positive. And I've learned that that's not really possible.
Yeah, you put you're like out of the frying pan into the fire, so to speak. So that's one of those things, like apologizing. There's this new thing now, like Trump never apologizes. And it's one of these charisma things that certain people train. They say you should never apologize because it shows weakness. Mm-hmm. And it's something like women are realizing, women apologize too much. Like they're in this, they have this cultural expectation where they're supposed to be submissive. And so they're always saying, I'm sorry. And you see this, I think I would even dare call it a meme, where it's like, stop apologizing.
Yes, for sure. But
it's
also
a thing.
Sometimes you need to. Like, I think I use the bar with myself. I'm like, if I were a man, would I apologize? And
that's
sometimes I would. Like, I don't think being a woman means that I should never be sorry for anything and I can be an asshole and that's okay because no one likes an asshole. But I don't like apologizing for things that I'm not sorry for. So the question is, am I genuinely sorry? And I have a really strong sense of guilt, so sometimes I am. But a lot of the time I'm not. And one thing I do is I don't always apologize. I'll clarify. A lot of my comics, when they take a feminist slant, and my brand of feminism is so vanilla. Like, it really is not edgy feminism. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with edgy feminism, but it's just not my brand. And I'll put that out. And I always have some man being like, oh, so you hate men now. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, I made a post about, what was the one that angered a man? Well, everyone angers at least one man. But, about a neckbeard. And he's saying to one woman, oh, you majored in sociology? What a waste of time. Why do women choose these useless majors? And then he's saying to another woman, oh, you majored in engineering? Why are women always trying to take over male majors? And women related to it. They were like, oh my God, this is so accurate. And then there's always a man being like, this doesn't happen. This never happens. Why do you hate men? I'm like, first of all, it's never happened to you because you're a man. So doesn't mean it's never happened to anyone. And second of all, nothing about this means I hate men. It means this character is being an asshole. Like, unless you're that character, this is not about you. And so I sometimes will clarify and being like, hey, I don't hate men. Like, I'm making this is a recurring character. Sometimes they know it's a recurring character and they think that's how I'm presenting all men. I'll be like, no, that's Damien the neckbeard is a recurring character. But there's a point where if I apologize for men too many times, then I'm a bad feminist, because then I'm pandering to this one angry teenage guy. And I'm like, okay, how much do I really want to get involved? I try to stay out of the comment section too much when it gets controversial. I'll just let people do their thing. I'll only intervene if someone says something truly horrible, but that's only happened 1 or 2 times.
It seems like the interaction that you offer your readers is a new thing that comic strip artists didn't really do before. And there's a little bit of that on Go Comics. I'm not sure exactly how active that is, but that's a thing that now fans have. They have access to the artist who reads their comments perhaps and knows when things are happening and can explain their work. Like in the past, artists would just put it out there and say, hey, you figure it out. And
I kind of am nostalgic for that, actually.
No, it's a wonderful thing. So you don't ever have to apologize or explain unless it gets really big. And I guess your standard of what's big enough is different because of the medium you're in, because you're in this very interactive social medium. I'm really curious to know how you figured out how to do a book and what that process was like. Because you had written, obviously, but making the technical leap to putting a book out on Amazon is something a lot of people have trouble with.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the formatting was its own hurdle. That would be pretty boring for me to tell you all the steps that took of like, oh, then I changed the margins and then I uploaded it to a Word doc. But that was actually one of the biggest hurdles. But I think...
I kind of am interested in those books.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Really?
so
Okay.
when you first went to Amazon, did you Google how to upload a book on Amazon and then figure it out
I literally
from there?
just Googled like how to self-publish a book, and they were like, oh, they make it super easy for you with KDP. You can just upload. And I was like, oh, cool. But I had images. So I was like, I tried to make it in a Word doc, but then the images would be like misaligned.
Sure.
Or like the wrong text would be with the wrong image. And so I spent probably like an entire weekend. And by an entire weekend, I mean like the hours I wasn't sleeping, I was realigning images in Microsoft Word in just this perpetual trial and error thing. And then I realized it was so stupid to me because they actually have software for this. I was like, what? Why have I been doing this? And I happen to have a Google Chromebook, but my husband has a Mac. So I was like, hey, can I use your Mac? Download this software.
What was the software?
It's like Kindle Create, I think it's called.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's really great. What I did was I just uploaded all the words in Kindle Create, and then I manually inserted the images where they should go. And it was tricky because some of my images are comics, which were taken with a decent software, so they look good on Kindle. But then the images from the actual diary were a little harder because those, they're scanned images from an 11-year-old's diary, so they're not exactly polished. So I had to edit them and change the contrast so that the pencil doesn't disappear, that boring stuff. But once I started using Kindle Create, it was actually super easy. And then the cover was actually the easiest part of it. I just drew myself and my diary, and then I put words on it, and I checked legally to make sure I could use those fonts, and I could. So that was all good. And one thing I do want to do is at some point, maybe my next book, I don't know, I want to release a collection of all my Reddit trolls because I have probably over 100, to be honest with you. And the problem, though, is that then that gets into copyright issues, especially because I think I have the right to anything I've written on Reddit, but some of the funniest trolling occurs in the comment section where my trolls will kind of like interact with people criticizing them. And that's someone else's content, technically. They wrote that comment. So I would need to get some kind of legal release from Reddit to do that. And I wouldn't even know where to start. But
could you get the permission of the people, or is that too much work?
The thousands of people my trolls have pissed off. That's like a class action kind of situation. Yeah, no, I couldn't do that. Well, also, I don't really want to talk to them.
The By Philippe people did a book that was, copies of social media interaction chats from women who had creeps texting them.
Oh,
and they just ran them. They just ran screenshots of the texting.
I don't know if that's legal. I guess no one's going to want to be like,
no guy is going to say, I was the jerk. Yeah.
Yeah, that was me. I demand my...
So you might be in the same boat. Like, who's going to admit, I was the idiot who took that fake character seriously or whatever.
It's the Ali G problem, right?
Like, it is the Ali G problem.
And
it's about like getting forgiveness as opposed to permission.
Right. I mean, does Ali G give them like release forms? Like, by the way.
I'm sure.
Well, some of them think they're going to be in a documentary. So they're being filmed with their consent. They just don't know what it's really for.
And also they're public figures. It's different. If you're going after just a common person commenting online, you're in a different area. They probably, like anybody can sue anybody for anything. Right. That's the thing. True. Are they going to? Is it worth it? No, what they'll probably do is if they ever see themselves in your book, they'll send you a letter saying, hey, that's me. You didn't have my permission. Then you could say, how was I going to get in touch with you? What can I offer you? Let me pay you $20 for your inclusion in the book.
Like PM me your panties 69 comments made. Like, excuse me, that was me.
Yeah, I didn't have the resources to hire a private detective and figure out where you lived and to get your send you a W-4 form.
It's an entertaining concept. And I actually I worried about that with my diary. I changed all the names and I had to black out the names if there were any like photographs from the diary because I was actually posting kind of revealing stuff about people that I knew, people I dated.
Right. You're very careful about the legal stuff. I'm impressed that you would be so concerned.
I'm a bit of a choir boy. I mean, as you can tell, caution and anxiety is kind of my thing. I'm always worried about doing things that will come back to get me. I'm always worried about angering people, and I'm always worried about making mistakes, probably because I've made so many, and I've just sort of tried to learn from them. For example, when I was 8, and this has really stuck with me, I published a newspaper for my school. Just to be funny, I published like a little satirical newsletter, and it was all like jokes about, my friends, and it was meant to be funny. This was originally meant to just be sent to my parents, not the whole school. So I had actually written some really mean things about this girl named Morgan who was trying to steal my best friend Samantha. For the record, still am not a big Morgan fan, and that is her real name, just not using the last name. And Morgan catfished me, by the way, in 5th grade. She made up a fake girl who was dating my boyfriend, and she catfished me. So frankly, awful. I think that we're even now. But I wrote this thing and was like, Morgan always tries to play with Samantha, and then when I play with Samantha, Morgan freaks out. She's so mean. I forgot that was in there, and I printed like 100 copies and like threw them all over my school. And I was so proud of this. And then at recess, someone came up to me and they were like, hey, I really liked your newspaper, but maybe you shouldn't mention like people's real names. I was like, what? I didn't. And then they showed it to me. I was like, I do not remember putting that in there. Like, and then I was like, oh my God, you don't understand. This was meant for my parents. And it's like, okay, so you write mean things about kids at school to show to your parents? Cool. Like, what a cool person you are. So that one incident has like shaped my entire life and how I relate to writing. And I go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. And at least it paid off.
At least that you learned from it. Yeah, and that you could actually exploit it. So I want to ask you about your process for coming up with jokes. Do you just see memes and come up with a way to parody those memes? Or do you sometimes come up with things that are just blank slate out of your mind? And if so, what's your process for doing that?
That's a great question. I think one of the things I've learned is always write things down that you find funny because you will not remember them. I always think I will, but I have so many comics that would have existed if I had just written them down that are gone forever.
It's a tragic loss.
It's a tragic loss. And I don't even know what they are. So like I can't even mourn them. If I knew what they were, they wouldn't be gone. Right. So that's the one thing is I always write things down. I'll just open my phone and I'll just write a note like, one of my comics, for example, is a neckbeard getting cucked by his sex robot. He's bought a sex robot, but the sex robot has become intelligent and has fallen in love with a Chad sex robot. And I remember I thought of that and I was like, oh, I'll remember it. It's such a weird idea. How could I forget that? But I was like, you know what? No, writing it down. Like, I'm not going to assume that I'll remember anything. And so for the comics, I think a lot of it is like where I get inspiration would probably come from, first of all, the extensive time I spend online. I spend so much time on Reddit. And it didn't start out as like me searching for comic ideas. The minute you look for it, it's not happening. It has to come up organically, which is really frustrating. But for example, I was on Reddit and I noticed that the way a lot of aspiring pickup artists talked about men was like kind of homoerotic. And I'm not like making a homophobic joke there, but like these guys are pretty homophobic. But at the same time, they'll be like, you know, the kind of guys that get all the girls are 6'11" and blonde with rippling muscles and a 10-inch penis. And I'm like, okay, what? You're like putting a lot of thought into describing this guy. And so I noticed that like topic come up a lot of like extensive, excruciating detail into like the musculature of this imaginary guy that these guys are all sort of fantasizing about. I'm like, this is interesting. So, that was the inspiration for one of my accounts, which was a guy on that subreddit, that pickup artist subreddit, lusting after his girlfriend's dad, but he didn't realize that's what it was. He's talking about how jealous he is of his girlfriend's dad, but it slowly comes out. He's just so beautiful, and like I just get lost staring in his eyes, and then it becomes okay, this is a joke. But you know, if I had never come across that organically, I never would have had that idea. So spending a lot of time in funny places, and a lot of my friends be like, why do you read this horrible stuff? But like you go on the stupidest subreddits and you get angry over what you see there. And I'm not just talking about misogyny. I'm talking about just people being idiots, like people with no sense of humor and you know, multi-level marketing people trying to sell their oils. And people are like, why do you do this? Like, do something more productive. I'm like, this is productive. Like, this is where I come up with my ideas. So I just surround myself with media. And I encourage people to surround themselves with media, not only that they find funny, but that they don't find funny, that they hate. A big thing for me is also boomer memes. You know, not to give a bad rep to boomers, because there's also some hilarious boomer comedians, but like your average, like, you know, xenophobic, misogynistic boomer that posts like minion memes about like, you don't like America, leave it, like that sort of stupid stuff. And so most people would like, I want to avoid that. That's not funny. That's stupid. I'm avoiding it. I'm like, no, I'm looking at that stuff.
Make fun of that.
Because I want to make fun of it, yeah. And so hate reading, I guess you could call it, is important. And then I don't have a huge social circle. I'm one of those like a few couple small friends, but my friends are really funny. I have a really high threshold for humor, which is probably kind of mean of me, but I don't care what people look like. I don't care how much money they have, but I care if they're funny and I care if they're kind. And so my friends are some of the funniest, kindest people in the world. And so they tell me the funniest stories. And sometimes their stories will spark something in me, and then I'll ask them like, hey, can I turn that into a comic? So some of my comics are things that have happened to my friends, things that have happened to me. One of my comics that was the most successful was me as the character watching a bunch of coworkers rib on someone, being like, oh, Jane, you're so weird, you're so strange, and she's, oh, you guys, you know, because I was in that situation at work. This girl sent an email that accidentally went out to 1 million people, and she intended for it to only go out to one, and everyone was like, Lily, you're so weird, you're so stupid. And I wasn't that close with her. And I was like, I feel like I look weird by not joining in. But what I anticipated is that if I joined in, I'd say I go too far with it. I'd be like, you fucking loser. And then everyone would be like, oh, wow, like that was super mean. So I turned that into a comic. And that's not even something that happened. That's just something I imagined would happen if I tried to get involved. And then I think, so those were like the biggest inspirations for like comics. And you can take those from like quick little things. For books, obviously like that cycle's a lot longer. You're not going to come up with 15 book ideas a day. And so that for me tends to be like themes that I've noticed in my family is a big one. You know, my diary book, obviously I had already laid the groundwork as a kid, but for future books, you know, I'm really close with my brother. And so I have actually a book that I haven't published yet, but it's in novel form. It's on my computer. And it's about a twin brother and sister combo with a single mother, and she's a former actress, and she's a big dramatist, and she's just always needs to be the center of attention. And our mother is not a former sitcom star who's a dramatist, but I know people like that because I was in theater, you know, and so I took sort of a piece from there, and then my brother and I being really close, but I made them twins because we act like we're twins, even though we're not. We can read each other's minds, like we're super close. I wish I was kidding about that, but like he knows exactly what I'm thinking all the time and is annoying. And I try to do the same to him. And so for books, it's usually a little bit more personal as opposed to like, oh, I saw this dumbass meme. But I mean, in some of my books, I will base characters off of Reddit accounts I've met. There are Redditors that don't realize they're in my comics because I look through their post history and I was like, this person is just a gold mine. But again, like I would never like call them out by name or anything like that.
One thing we haven't talked about, I'm really curious about, is that your dad is a comedy professional, behind the scenes person. Most people probably don't know who he is.
Right.
But
and my mom, actually.
And your mom.
Yeah.
You said she was an artist. What else does she do?
She's a photographer, and she's done writing as well. And, and she's really funny. My parents are two of the funniest people I know.
What is, so that's a huge head start for you. Like all the things you're describing to me that you did are just so smart. And it takes a lot of comedy wannabes a long time to figure out kind of basic things like, oh, put myself out there for free,
right.
Find a way to get my stuff seen. And just the attitude that you have about it, not worrying about money at first, building an asset, all this really smart stuff. What advice did you get from them? And was it ever like actual advice, or did you just like watch and learn?
Great question. So first of all, I want to say that one of the reasons that I am so private with my comics is because like I don't want this to be because of my parents. And I think not that my parents are nearly this famous, but like Stephen King's son wanted to be a writer, but he didn't want to use his last name. And he made this fake name, and he put out a book with absolutely zero help from Stephen King, and that was the only way anyone would take him seriously. And so that's an extreme example. Neither of my parents are Stephen King.
But I get that. I think that's important.
Yeah, exactly. And so I wanted to do this completely on my own with no help at all. And that includes like no monetary help, no like nothing like that. And so, hence why I'm kind of mysterious. And so in terms of advice they gave me, though, that is where I have a huge advantage. And I'm not even going to lie about it. My parents raised me with comedy from the day I was born. I mean, they always told me, and they didn't always mean this, but they said, if it's funny, it's okay. And so I would do things at school that were bad. I was kind of a bad kid, but if that thing was funny, they'd let me get away with it. And one of those things was, I can tell you two of those things that stick out with me the most. One of them, I hated my gym teacher. I was not an athletic kid, and she made my life hell. So I told everyone she was an alien and that she was body swapped with an alien. And for some reason, these kids believe me. Honestly going to wonder why these kids took this seriously, but they did, and I was pretty convincing. And my teacher brought my parents in, and she was like, she told everyone that I'm an alien, and I had to like let the kids feel my arm to prove to them that I was real. And they still think I'm an alien because she told them I was a convincing body double. And I was 6. And like, I think that's pretty funny for a 6-year-old. So my parents started laughing in the meeting with the teacher. They were like, I'm sorry, this is too funny. Like, we can't take this seriously. And they came home, and I thought they were going to like scream at me, but they were like, that was hilarious. Like, good job. Like they weren't going to get mad at me. And then the other thing was,
you're trolling people at 6. That's wonderful.
Oh, I've been trolling people since as soon as I could figure out how to do it. And then when I was 8, I think everyone had to learn the recorder. It was a terrible instrument. And I really sucked at it, and I just sort of refused to practice. And so my music teacher, who thought she was leading like the Metropolitan Opera House, like she took herself way too seriously. She was like, if you don't learn hot cross buns, it was such an important life skill. She's like, if you don't learn hot cross buns, you're not going to play in the concert. And everyone's going to wonder why all the other kids are playing and that little girl isn't playing. And I was like, well, that kind of ruins the concert for you because it's distracting. Clearly, I knew this was a hollow threat, but I was upset about it. And I talked to my dad, and he was like, like no one's going to stop you if you start playing. Like no one's going to stop the concert and run on stage and like escort you off. Like they're just going to let you do it. So you should just fake it. Just pretend that you know hot cross buns. Like just don't breathe into the recorder. And I was like, okay. What I did instead was I did like a Kenny G type solo on the recorder, pretending to be doing hot cross buns, but actually just sort of going nuts. My dad's advice was to lay low and just pretend to be playing hot cross buns. But I was like going crazy on this recorder, and everyone noticed, and it was very distracting, but it was great revenge for threatening not to include me in the concert. And so that was the kind of thing that like a lot of parents would have gotten mad about, but my parents were like, that was hilarious. That's fine. But they've always encouraged me to be kind. That's another reason, like I don't punch down, be kind with your comedy. And I think the one thing they've said my mom says this especially, is like, have mercy for your victims. Like if you're making fun of someone, even if you think that person is like the worst person ever, be kind. And I think a great example of that is like Donald Trump. Like a lot of people make fun of Donald Trump, and I'm not opposed to doing it. I don't do political stuff, but I certainly have no problem with making fun of Donald Trump. But I always kind of twitch a little bit when someone makes a comment about his appearance. Because I'm like, well, there are people who are overweight and they're going to see that and be like, oh, so I guess I'm a joke too, like not that Donald Trump doesn't deserve it because he rags on other people's appearance all the time, but you have to be careful about like, making fun of something that someone doesn't control or like, and it's hard because it's also like he of all people should be able to take it, but he's not the only person who has to take it when you make fun of him for being overweight. So I don't know, those jokes are still kind of funny to me, honestly, but I personally wouldn't make them, I'd laugh at them, but I wouldn't make them. I'm part of the problem probably.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. It's like you haven't been able to figure out anything better to make fun of him for besides like his hair or his skin color. Like that's pretty lame.
Especially the hair because he doesn't control that. Like the skin color.
He controls the hair.
He tries to control the hair. See, I'm doing it now. Like he attempts to control. No, damn it, I'm doing what I just preached against. That was too easy.
And what he eats does affect his weight. What he chooses to eat. But then you're getting into the territory of fat shaming or whatever.
Right, exactly. And not everyone has as much control over their weight as others. And I'm pretty open about the fact that like I'm lucky enough that I don't have to work out that hard to stay at a weight that I'm happy with. But there are people that actually do eat really healthy and actually do work out and they still struggle with their weight. So I'm resistant to look at someone and say, oh, they have a bad lifestyle when, I don't know their health. I don't know what's going on in their bodies. I don't know, so yeah. Although I've heard Donald Trump has a bad lifestyle. I've heard that separately.
Yes.
Ketchup on the steak, which is not unhealthy, but is horrible to ruin steak like that.
Other than those sort of like global philosophical type of influences you got from your parents, no real world down in the dirt advice on how to get your stuff out there, how to get seen.
Oh no, they did. But the thing is, my parents are pretty active on Facebook and like they're really savvy. But like, are they active on Reddit? No. Are they active on Twitter? Yes. Facebook, yes. Reddit, Instagram, maybe not as much. And are they familiar with like meme group culture and like, do they know what yeet is? Like, and like, not really. So some of that I had to figure out for myself, but they're really good at sort of understanding the basics of like putting out content people want to see, no matter what channel that is. So I definitely didn't go to them for advice. Like, what subreddit, mom, should I post this in? Like, my mom's not going to be like, you should try like troll X chromosomes. Right. But I think what my parents are able to tell me is like, I'll show them something and I'll be like, is this worth it? Like, I was like, is this even like worth my time? Like, is this funny enough? Because I think everything I do is amazing. I'm a clinical narcissist. I put out something and I'm like, this is the funniest thing ever. Everyone's going to love it. And sometimes I will show it to my parents for a gut check. Like that theater camp autobiography. They were like, I would wait on this. They think something nice. They were like, I would let this mature, AKA wait until you grow up and realize this is stupid. Yeah. And so I will ask them, I'm like, does this even make sense? But the diary book was something they both were like, yes, this is great. We love it. Even though it kind of roasts them a little bit, they were like, we love it. It's funny. It's relatable. Do something with it. And I remember one of my concerns was like, yeah, but no one knows who I am, because that was what publishers told me. And I think it was my dad this time who said, that's why it's good. Like, yes, were you a cliche, typical teenage girl? Like, yeah, but so was everyone else. It's relatable. Totally if you had this super weird childhood, people wouldn't be able to relate to it. The fact that I was just raised in the suburbs and like had a pretty normal life and like was obsessed with boys and like having bigger boobs, that's something I think a lot of people can relate to, except the girls who always had great boobs. And to them, I'm very jealous. But yeah, and so they've always been really good at gut checking. And my husband's good for that too.
That's great. Well, you had some great built-in mentors that helped you out, but Obviously you've done the work and you've done a lot of writing, and I'm lucky to have caught you really early in this.
Yeah.
You've already really blown up. You've already done a book. Really excited to see where you're going to go in the future.
Thank you.
If you liked this podcast, you're going to love all the comedy writing resources at howtowritefunny.com. Check it out.